The first Saturday of every May, people from all over the world make their way to Louisville, Kentucky for what has come to be known as the most exciting 2 minutes in sports. The Kentucky Derby is a tradition dating back 150 years, and while the race itself may only last 2 minutes, the festivities leading up to it last 2 weeks. There are parades, air shows, balloon races, and concerts. Each day, the Kentucky Derby Festival has a different schedule and itinerary of fun and exciting things to do and experience. 40-year-old father of two, Christopher Jones, loved the festivities, and as a local, he looked forward to them every year. On May 4th of 2016, he attended the free concert on the waterfront, and when it was over, he took off walking toward home. Chris Jones was walking down the street in his neighborhood when a car pulled up beside him, rolled down the window, and yelled at him to get out of the street. The man in the car then fired one shot. The bullet went through Chris's arm, entered his torso, and hit his liver. When police responded to the scene, they found Chris lying on the ground. He was rushed to the hospital, but the damage was too severe, and Chris succumbed to his injuries. He was pronounced dead shortly after. Detectives canvassed the area and followed a few leads, but there wasn't much that was panning out to point them in the right direction. A few weeks later, the bodies of 14-year-old Larry Ordway and his brother, 16-year-old Maurice Gordon, were found dumped in the backyard of an abandoned house nearby. The boys had been stabbed over and over. Then their bodies were set on fire and dumped like garbage. These homicides had nothing in common. One was the drive-by of a 40-year-old man, and one was the stabbing and burning of 2 children. But as the investigations into each carried on, police began to realize that these murders were connected, and as they pieced together the puzzle, they uncovered a story so evil it would send shockwaves through this community for years to come. My name is Brandy Churchwell, and this is 13th Juror Podcast, where we unravel complex court cases and present them as compelling stories, breaking down the details and weighing the evidence from a non-legal perspective, just like jurors do. Today, we are taking a look at the tragic murder of 3 Louisville natives who were all in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the man responsible for those deaths, Kentucky rapper Brice Rhodes. "14-year-old Larry Ordway was an honor roll student who loved sports and loved music. He and his brother, 16-year-old Maurice Gordon, were inseparable. The boys were described by their grandmother as happy boys who never got in trouble. In the summer of 2015, when the boys were 13 and 15, their mom began dating a man named Brice Rhodes. Brice was a rapper who went by the name Rambo. He never made it big and wasn't destined for greatness, but he made a few music videos with a bunch of guns, awkward dancing, and lyrics about drugs and murder. I wasn't a fan. But even though Brice Rhodes isn't my cup of tea, the lifestyle that he was living, or at least the one that he was portraying, could come across as enticing to young, impressionable boys. Brice bragged about being in gangs, selling drugs, and having money, even though he lived in an apartment with his mom. He bragged with the type of bravado that is repulsive to emotionally developed adults, but it can be impressive to children who don't know any better. We often see portrayals of people in the gang or drug world as more glamorized than it actually is, especially in music. Songs that glorify violence and drugs often promote a warped sense of reality. And children who aren't yet mentally and emotionally developed enough to understand that can often fall victim to the influences that the songs are promoting. Brice Rhodes is one of those people who wanted to be perceived as powerful, which is why this 25-year-old man seemed to surround himself with nothing but impressionable teenage boys that he could manipulate. Larry and Maurice saw the version of Brice that he was portraying, the glamorized version, and that was enticing to them. They started to look up to him. Bryce came into their lives and was able to offer them shoes, money, even gave them guns to hold and wave around in his music videos, which made them feel grown. It gave them a feeling of power that young boys don't often have. It wasn't until May of 2016 that Larry and Maurice finally snapped back to reality after experiencing firsthand the dark side of the life of Brice Rhodes. Bryce had a violent history. In 2014, 2 years before the murders, Bryce was charged with grabbing his own mom by the neck and punching her in the face while she was putting up groceries. The following year, he was charged with punching his girlfriend repeatedly while she held their 4-month-old daughter. He has 2 other domestic assault charges from 2013 and 2014, and according to Wave 3 News, he's also on the Indiana Sex Offender Registry after being convicted of a criminal confinement of a victim less than 18 years old. He's not the type to learn a lesson or rehabilitate. Bryce only dated the boy's mom briefly, and the relationship was never serious. But even after they stopped talking, he continued to spend time with these 2 children and their friends. He bought them all clothes and shoes, took them out to eat, drove them around, and convinced them that they could all become famous along with him through his rap career that he was sure was really about to take off. So the story I'm going to tell y'all today, it involves a group, which means there's a lot of names. So since we're talking about a group, I'm going to try to break down who is who in this story before we get too far into it. Larry and Maurice are the brothers that met Bryce when their mom briefly dated him the year before the murders. So Larry and Maurice's best friend, Anwan Carter, went to school with them. And Anwan's cousin, Jacory, met Larry and Maurice through Anwan. So there's 14 and 16-year-old brothers, Larry and Maurice, and their friends, 15 and 17-year-old cousins, Anwan and Jacory. If you want visuals or need help remembering who's who, I put a graphic on 13thjurorpodcast.com. So 15-year-old Anwan met Larry and Maurice at school, and basically the boys became best friends. They used to play sports, flirt with girls, do normal teenage things. His cousin, 17-year-old Jacory, had recently lost his job at White Castle. Jacory's dad was killed when he was growing up, and he lived with his mom for most of his childhood. But he had been on the streets for a couple weeks now, in and out of people's houses, even sleeping in the stairwell at his girlfriend's house, and often stealing from cars just to be able to get money to eat. He was in a really tough situation, one that would be difficult for anyone, much less a 17-year-old child. One night, these 4 kids were hanging out with 25-year-old Brice Rhodes, and a plan to make some money set in motion a series of deadly events that would forever change the lives of everyone involved and everyone around them. It all started when Bryce was telling the boys that he knew a way for them to make $10,000. $10K is a lot of money to these kids. Remember, Jacory is stealing from cars to be able to eat. These kids are 14, 15, 16, and 17. Bryce is telling them that there's this guy who has a bounty on his head, and all they have to do to get that money is just get a gun. Bryce was older and bigger than these boys, and he was always coming up with ideas, but they didn't really think that he was serious about this one, at least not at first. Jacory got a gun that same day from someone that he said was related to Larry and Maurice. He got it while he was at their house. He and his cousin Anwan would both eventually tell police that Jacory got the gun for his protection. But Anwan would later change and say that they all knew what it would be used for. Jacory still maintains that he got that gun for his protection. Bryce and the boys go out looking for this guy who has a bounty on his head. 16-year-old Maurice is driving Bryce's car, a blue Mazda, and Bryce is sitting in the back seat behind him. Maurice's brother, 14-year-old Larry, is riding shotgun, and Jacory is sitting behind him. Anwan, who is only 15, is too young to drive, but he steals a truck that day and is driving it around, following behind the rest of the group in the blue Mazda. They approach 41st Street, where Chris Jones is walking home after attending the free concert at Waterfront Park, part of the Kentucky Derby Festival that he enjoyed so much. Jones is in the street, and when the blue Mazda gets to the end of the block near where Jones is walking, Bryce spots him and says, "That looks like the guy." They pull up, and Bryce rolls down his window. He yells at Jones, saying to get out of the road, bitch. Jacory, who was sitting beside Bryce in the back seat of the car, describes this moment.
stopped the car, and he seen somebody in the middle of the street. And Brice told him to get out the street. Shot him.
Brice fires one shot with the 9mm handgun. The bullet travels through Jones's arm, into his torso, and then his liver. The blue Mazda and the truck following behind both take off. About 5 to 8 houses down, Brice fires the gun again, this time toward someone's house. A car pulls up near where Jones is lying on the street, and the man gets out and sees that it's a body and calls 911. When they arrive, they find Jones in the street, injured but alive. He's taken to a hospital where he succumbs to his injuries. Police canvass the area, talking to neighbors, trying to get leads. Some neighbors say that they heard multiple shots, but there's only one shell case there on the scene. They were told by someone that there may have been a guy on a bike with a gun. Someone else said there may have been a Chrysler 300, but none of these leads pan out. They gathered surveillance footage from a neighbor's camera, and Jones can be seen walking down the street on his way home. Shortly after he's out of the line of camera, you can see the Mazda followed by the truck that drive toward him. The murder happens, though, outside of the scope of the video. Pictures are taken to document everything. The CSI team does their thing, but there's not much to go on. And the lead investigator, Detective Brian Griffin, believes this case may go unsolved. I know that y'all have heard me on the podcast and on my YouTube channel talking about Magic Mind. I've told you how great I feel since I've started taking it. I've got my boyfriend taking it, my best friend and her husband, and a lot of y'all have started taking it. And I love getting messages from you telling me how it's helped you so much and how great you feel. There are so many distractions in the world, and part of making a podcast is being able to focus and get all the details together and get everything done. I can't even tell you how much Magic Mind has helped with that. My focus is now better than it has ever been before in my entire life. And also, people think that you need to be stressed to be a high performer, and that harms both your mental and physical health. I have been getting so much more done, and my stress level has actually gone way down. So what if you can be more efficient while also not being stressed out and having an enjoyable day? That's where Magic Mind comes in. Magic Mind is a mental performance shot. It's something that you add to your daily routine, and it gets you focused, mentally clear, motivated, and productive. And it has 100% of your daily vitamin C and D per bottle. All of the ingredients are 100% safe. They are third-party tested and sourced from the best suppliers. And it's not a quick fix. Magic Mind looks toward the long term to achieve a balance of productive and stress-free living. Some of the ingredients can take about 3 to 4 days to reach their full effect. So drinking Magic Mind daily and seeing how you feel after 1 week versus 1 week without it, it's night and day. And it's not a coffee replacement. You can still have your morning coffee. This is just something that you add to your routine. Magic Mind uses 12 active ingredients to help support your body's energy engine. Day after day, it's not a fleeting charge up. It's just a full enhancement for a brilliant day and an even better tomorrow. There's no risk. They're so confident in what they built that they will refund 100%, no questions asked for 100 days after buying. There's an offer. I've been sending it to all my friends, all my family, and I'm about to give it to y'all as well. You have a limited offer that you can use now that gets you up to 48% off your first subscription or 20% off a one-time purchase with code JUROR20 at checkout. You can claim it at www.magicmind.com/juror20. After the drive-by that resulted in the death of Christopher Jones, they all went back to Maurice and Larry's house. The weight of what just happened started to sink in with the boys.
To be honest, we ain't never seen nobody get shot, you know what I mean? So, I'm not gonna lie, we was all scared, you know what I mean? It wasn't just them two, we was all scared, you know what I'm saying? Maurice, Larry, all of us, we was scared, man. Yeah, we was young, you know what I'm saying? We just went along with it.
Brice told them all not to tell anyone what happened. They didn't really talk about it that night. They didn't really talk much at all about anything that night. Brice told Anwan that he needed to burn the truck that he drove in case it was on camera somewhere. So he drove it out somewhere else, poured gas inside of it, and then lit it on fire. After that, Larry and Maurice seemed to struggle with what happened. They told Jacory that they didn't want to be around Brice anymore after all that. They wanted to distance themselves. It was a lot. Over the next couple weeks, the 4 boys, Larry and Maurice, and Jacory and Anwan, hung out pretty much every day, but they rarely saw Brice. Brice had told the boys not to say anything to anybody about what happened the night that he shot and killed Christopher Jones. He didn't want word getting out because he didn't want it to come back to him in any way. A couple weeks later, Brice began to worry that Maurice was talking. Anwan said that he overheard a phone call between Brice and Larry and Maurice's mom. He said only those 5 guys that were there knew about what happened that night. But then Maurice went and told his whole house. Brice was mad that Maurice told his mom, and he started worrying that they were going to say something to the police. At that point, it had been a couple weeks, and Jones' murder was still unsolved, and Brice wanted it to stay that way. He told Jacory that Maurice telling his mom what happened meant he can't mess with them anymore. But the more he thought about it, the more he was worried about what would happen. Brice told Jacory he may have to just kill both brothers. Jacory was shocked. He didn't know if Brice was serious about what he was saying or if he was just angry and talking. He didn't know what to believe, but he knew that Larry and Maurice had said that they didn't want to hang out with Brice anymore either, so he figured at least they wouldn't be around him. That would give things time to calm down. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. On Saturday, May 21st, 2016, Jacory and Anwan were riding around with their other cousin, Q. They were calling Larry and Maurice's phones because they were wanting to go to Larry and Maurice's house to spend the night. Jacory still didn't have a place to stay, so he was crashing at different friends' houses every night. So he called the brothers multiple times, trying to get in touch with them so that he and Antoine could go over there. The brothers weren't answering their phones, so Jacory and Anwan just decided to show up at their house with Q. When they got there, Larry and Maurice's cousin answered the door and said that the brothers weren't there. Jacory and Anwan kept calling them, but they weren't picking up. Jacory didn't know what was going on, so finally, he called Brice's phone. Brice answered, and Jacory asked, "Where are Larry and Maurice?" Brice responded, "They're right here." Jacory was confused. The boys said that they weren't going to hang out with Brice anymore. So why were they at his house? And the last thing that Brice had said was that he was going to kill Larry and Maurice. But Jacory said that during the phone call, it kind of sounded like a party over there. He could hear other people, and it seemed like maybe everything was good. Jacory thought, well, everything's fine now, right? They're partying, everything seems good, so Brice must not have been serious about wanting to kill them. Everything's fine. So he asked Q to drive them over to Brice's so that they could join the party.
At that point, I didn't think he was serious no more. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't really think nothing of it. I thought he was just going to let him live and we was all going to be cool. You know, stuff like that. I didn't really think he was really going to do that. I thought we were just going to party, so.
Jacory knew that Larry and Maurice were going to be staying there at Brice's, and he needed a place to crash because he still didn't have anywhere to go. Q and Anwan both said that they didn't want to go to Brice's, but Jacory said he insisted on going over there because he didn't have anywhere else to go, and he just really needed somewhere to stay that night.
I insisted on going anyway, even though Q and Anwan told me not to go. I insisted because I ain't had nowhere to go. Q and Anwan really could have went to their family. Me, I just wanted somewhere to stay at night. I ain't really wasn't thinking about hurting nobody or nothing like that. We wasn't thinking like that. Anwan didn't want to go.
Q drove Jacory and Anwan to Brice's house. But Q didn't like Brice, and he didn't want to hang around him. And he didn't like his cousins hanging around with Brice either. So he refused to go in. Q dropped Jacory and Anwan off, and then he left. When the boys got to Brice's house, they saw Brice and Larry and Maurice, And there was one female there and two guys that they didn't know. The female ends up leaving because she said that there were too many guys there. And of the two guys that the boys didn't know, one of them has never been named. He's never been identified. The other one is 19-year-old Tyrion Coleman. Everything seems cool for a while. They were drinking and partying, and everyone seems fine. They were joking around with each other, wrestling around, and at some point, Jacory and Maurice actually end up getting into an argument. Now, Jacory said that's not unusual for this group of guys when they're partying. It happens, and they can get aggressive or snappy with each other, but they're always cool the next day. Maurice ends up grabbing Bryce's knife and holding it up like he's going to lunge at Jacory. Jacory said he jumped back, but he said he knew that Maurice wasn't going to stab him. He knew it wasn't that serious. But when Maurice grabbed Bryce's knife, it triggered a series of events so brutal that it'll haunt these boys for the rest of their lives. Jacory thought that Bryce was cool with Maurice now, that everything was fine. But when Maurice grabbed Bryce's knife and held it up at Jacory, Bryce is the one who reacted to him, almost like he was waiting for an excuse. Bryce grabbed his knife from Maurice, then smacked him for picking it up. Then he starts asking Maurice, "Are you telling on me or something?" Maurice tells Bryce that he's not telling on him. He's not saying anything. But Bryce doesn't believe Maurice, and he tells Jacory that they have to violate him.
He said, "I want you to violate him." I was scared. So, I'm like, "What you mean?" He said, he's like, "I want you to punch him in his chest. And if you hit him in his face, I'm going to hit you." I just remember he had me punching him. He said, "Stop."
Bryce tells Jacory to punch Maurice in the chest until he says stop. So Jacory does what he's instructed to do. He said he didn't know what Bryce meant when he said that they had to violate Maurice, but he sees now that Bryce wants to hurt Maurice to punish him for telling his mom about the shooting. So Jacory goes along with it because he was thinking that that's all that's going to be, just punching him in the chest. He said he thought that Bryce wouldn't do anything else because that's his quote-unquote big homie. When Bryce tells him to stop, he stops, and he said he thought everything's good now. Punishment is over.
I thought everything was fine at that point until he said, "We got to tie him up."
Have you guys heard of LAL? LAL is laser-assisted lipo, and the results are incredible. I've been looking at before and afters from Sonobello, and these women look incredible. Lipo used to be such a bad word. We're all supposed to act like we love every single part of our bodies, but you deserve to get the body that you want. I am a mom. I had a kid. I know that getting your body back is really hard. I get it. So that's why I want you guys to check out Sonobello. The most known secret with celebs and influencers, so many have had lipo. Whether it's a small touch-up or a total makeover, no one has a perfect body. But lipo has changed, and Sonobello has been at the forefront with using LAL technology and getting these beautiful, natural outcomes for each person. Our friends at Sonobello are offering you their best deal. You're now included in their Friends and Family Holiday Savings event. You'll get the same price that Sonobello Family and Friends pay. But appointments are limited, so please get on this. Sonobello doctors are masters in micro laser fat removal, a brilliant technique that removes stubborn fat permanently. Wherever your problem areas are, tummy, love handles, thighs, arms, it's gone in one comfortable visit. Eating healthy and workouts are great. Keep doing that. But if you want to lose the stubborn fat in one visit, check out Sonobello. Save big during Sonobello's Friends and Family Holiday Savings event. Schedule your free consultation now at sonobello.com/brandy. That's Sonobello, SONOBELLO.com/brandy. When Bryce told Jacory to punch Maurice in the chest, and then he told him to stop, Jacory thought that the punishment for Maurice was done. He had no idea what was about to happen. The series of events that unfolds and the brutality of it is something that Jacory still struggles with today. As things start happening, Jacory starts putting it together that Bryce and these two older guys are in on this whole thing, and he doesn't know what else to do besides go along with it. Bryce began to tie up 14-year-old Larry and his brother, 16-year-old Maurice. He and the older guys put the young brothers in the bathroom, and then he said that they were all going to take a vote to decide if the boys should live or die. Anwan and Jacory both said that they voted no, but the three bigger, older guys voted yes. I want to warn you, this part is not easy to hear. If you have kids around, or if you think that it might be too disturbing, skip forward about 3.5 minutes. Bryce decides that the brothers should die. He lays down some sheets and blankets on the carpeted living room floor. He leaves Larry in the bathroom tied up while he forces a crying Maurice to his knees to beg for forgiveness. Bryce then puts a sock in his mouth and puts a ski mask over his head. He begins punching Maurice in the chest. After about 3 or 4 punches, Tyrion hands Bryce a knife. Maurice tries to fight it as much as he can. Bryce pins him down and begins stabbing him.
What was Maurice doing while this was going on?
What can you do?
Who was in the room while this was happening?
It was me, brother, Bryce, 2 other people, and my Reece. He's pretty much fighting, you know.
Jacory gets emotional as he relives these moments. He felt stuck. Bryce was older and much bigger than they were, and the other 2 guys that were with Bryce were also older and bigger. There's 3 of them. Maurice and Larry are tied up, so he and 15-year-old Anwan are outnumbered.
2 other people that was in there, I didn't really know. They was already there when we got there, so I'm thinking that, you know what I'm saying? And my man, I couldn't do nothing but stand there, worrying if somebody's gonna do something to us for, trying to interrupt anything.
Anwan testifies that he felt the same way. These were his best friends, but he knew that if he didn't go along with what was happening, he would suffer the same fate.
Now, these guys are your best friends, right?
Yeah.
What's running through your mind?
Make sure I get out.
What's that?
I gotta make sure I get out. Try to save somebody else. Make sure I'm safe.
And what would have stopped you from getting out?
Probably if I didn't go along with it.
What would have happened?
Probably been with him. Probably same situation. Same fate.
Bryce continues to stab Maurice until he stops breathing. He decides that they all need to take a part in this. This wasn't going to be like the Christopher Jones murder where he's the only one who would go down if someone talked. So he hands the knife to Anwan and tells Anwan that he needs to stab Maurice too. The knife gets passed around to the others and back to Bryce. They take Maurice's body and drag him to the other side of the room by the door. They turn their attention to Larry. 14-year-old Larry, who's tied up in a bathroom, crying because he just listened to his 16-year-old brother plead for his life as he was tortured and killed just on the other side of the door. They brought Larry out and forced him to his knees. He tried to kick and get his hands free, but it was no use. The rag in his mouth, ski mask on his face, 14-year-old Larry suffered the same fate that his brother did just moments before. Bryce passed the knife, wanting the others to stab a few times too. But Anwan said that he was already dead by the time Bryce passed the knife around. Jacory said that once they were there and Bryce had made them stab Larry and Maurice's bodies, then they were in it. He said they were just as guilty. He breaks down as he says he just couldn't save them.
I just know once we was in it. There was no, we involved pretty much. We there. We just, so we just as guilty as we there. Couldn't do nothing though. I mean, I was scared. So it was all scared. I don't know. I just know couldn't really save him.
They drug Larry's body over by the door with his brother. Brice ordered Jacory and Anwan to put their bodies in storage totes, the kind that you put Christmas decorations in to store in your garage. Brice's blue Mazda was outside, and they carried the totes with the bodies, put one in the back seat and one in the trunk. Brice said that he and the other two older guys, Tyrion and the one that he didn't know his name, were going to go in Brice's car to get rid of the bodies. Brice lived in an apartment with his mom, but his mom and sister were out of town, so he had the place to himself at the time. When Brice was leaving, he told Jacory and Anwan to stay there and clean up the blood while they were gone. He told them to use bleach, make sure they get it up, and told them go ahead and do his mom's dishes while they're gone too. The boys stayed up all night cleaning. They used bleach, like Brice said, and scrubbed the floor with rags until the next morning when Brice got back. When asked why they didn't just leave while Brice was gone, the boys said they didn't have any way to leave. They didn't have a car, and even if they did, they were too scared of what would happen if they left, especially after what they just saw.
Me personally, I never witnessed or seen nothing like that in my life, so man, I don't know why we didn't leave, man. To be honest, I just know we was scared. We just went along. We just did what he told us to do.
Brice came back the next morning alone, and he told Anwan and Jacory that the bodies were burnt. He said that he dumped them in the backyard of an abandoned house on the West End. Brice said they needed to get rid of any evidence. They bagged up the rags, clothes, blankets, anything with blood on it. They put the bags in the trunk of Brice's car and drove it around to various dumpsters, and then set fire to the dumpsters. They noticed that there was blood in the back seat of Brice's car, so Brice took the seat out and put it in the back of someone's garage. But Jacory and Anwan weren't sure of whose garage it was, and they didn't know if Brice knew the person or not. Jacory said there was a pair of black boots that he and Maurice had swapped back and forth. He took those boots with him, and Anwan grabbed Maurice's phone. Then Brice took the boys to get some food, and then dropped off Jacory at his grandmother's house and dropped off Anwan at home. Jacory ends up putting the boots in a closet at his girlfriend's. Anwan keeps Maurice's phone. He uses it to make calls and even answers it when Larry and Maurice's mom calls. He tells her that Larry and Maurice are fine. He just borrowed his phone. On Sunday, May 22nd, a woman named Donna Beasley is returning home from church when she notices something in the backyard of the empty house next door to her on River Park Drive. She calls 911 to report it. And then what she originally thinks might be mannequins, she realizes are the bodies of two children. Officers arrive, but they aren't prepared for what they see. The brothers are laid out together, blood-stained boxers clinging to their bodies, and what's left of a burnt sheet lying on top of them. Maurice had been stabbed more than a dozen times, and Larry more than 20. Officers can tell that they're young, but they have no way of identifying them. The investigators contact a forensic artist that was able to put together 2 renderings. Police send the renderings to every news channel in the area asking for help. The sketches are released to the public late Monday night, and on Tuesday, the assistant principal at the boys' school calls in, saying she thinks that it could be Larry and Maurice. They get the boys' home address from the school and go talk to their mom, who's able to positively identify them. The boys' mom, Elizabeth Wren, tells detectives that her sons haven't been here since Saturday, but she didn't report them missing because when she called their phone, their friend answered and said that they were fine. They had just gone to the store and he was using their phone and would have them call back. Investigators learned that the kids were last seen on Saturday, getting in a car with Brice Rhodes. Meanwhile, the community in the neighborhood where the boys were found, They're scared and angry. They don't know who's responsible or why, and they don't know what police are doing about it. The police working the investigation haven't yet released the identity of the boys, and news crews interview neighbors who call for justice for these unnamed children. Vigils are held, a memorial is put at the scene, and the public demands answers. With their victims identified and a main suspect named, police are in a rush against time to gather as much evidence as they can to find out exactly what happened, build their case, and make an arrest. On the next episode, police begin to narrow in on Brice, but it isn't until they get one of the other boys to talk that they're able to get the full story of what led to the gruesome murders, and also finally crack the case into Christopher Jones' unsolved murder. Even with a mountain of evidence building, Brice denies involvement, but prosecutors seek the death penalty. As the case begins to move through the judicial system, Brice's behavior begins making headlines. He taunts Larry and Maurice's mom in the courtroom, threatens the life of a judge, spits on his attorney, and attempts an escape, just to name a few. His antics cause delays, and it will be 7 long years before the case finally makes it to trial. So how does this story end, and where are the other boys now? All that and more on part 2 of the trial of Brice Rhodes. If you're enjoying 13th Juror Podcast, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify, and share this episode with your friends. For more information, photos, and episode guides, visit 13thjurorpodcast.com.